For this portion of the project, we need to create symbols for all of the different animated parts of your face. By now, you should have illustrated the entire parts of the face and have each one of those parts on their own separate layer. Before we get started, let's go ahead and open up our library. And inside of your library, the only thing that should be in there is your illustration that you brought in for the first part of this. Now, we're not going to need this illustration anymore, so I'm just going to go down to my timeline and turn off visibility for it altogether, just so that I see everything that's part of it. Now, as with everything we do, I suggest taking this one part at a time, just so that you don't get ahead of yourself and it makes everything nice and easy to work on. Essentially, what we want to do is to select each of these parts and turn them into a symbol. I'll start off with my body at the very bottom. With it, you can either right-click and choose Convert to Symbol, or you can hit F8. Either one will give you the same results. Make sure to name your symbol something appropriate. So since this is the body, I'll call this the body. Make sure the type is going to be a graphic, and we'll keep the registration at the center. Everything else will remain the same, and we'll say OK. Moving on to the next parts, let's do the face. So we'll right-click, choose Convert to Symbol. We'll call this the face, and say OK. And do this for all of the different parts of whatever face that you have. With all of these now done, you can have a look at my library and get an idea of how I've set this up. Do note that I've indicated both left and right for each of the different parts. So there's the white of the eye, left and right, and the pupil of the eye, left and right. And even for my hair, I've got a front and a back version of it. So everything in your library is well defined as its own graphic symbol. Now, there are going to be some parts of the face that I need to be able to move around and have nested parts inside of it. I'm specifically talking about the eyes and the mouth. For instance, I want to be able to move the eye inside of the eye socket and have them move independently. Here's what I mean. Let's go over to our library panel, and at the very bottom, we're going to create a new symbol, and let's call this symbol the right eye. Notice I did it in all caps just to distinguish it between all of the other parts of the right eye. Now, this will be a graphic, and we'll say OK to that, and this will open up our graphic editor. From here, I can add both the white and the pupil to their own timelines so that I can move them independently. So we'll go down to this timeline. We'll call this the white. Make sure to spell it correctly, white layer. And then I can go to find the white of the eye on the right side. Let's add it to here. I always, for good measure, like to line up my rotation and my center points. So that looks good for that. And let's do the right of the pupil as well. We'll drag one of those on and place it nice and centered within there. Now, that pupil should have been on its own timeline. So you can see I've already made a mistake. I'm simply going to go up to Edit. Let's cut it away. We'll go back down to my timeline. Let's make a pupil layer. And let's paste it in the same spot there. So now the pupil has its own layer and the white has its own layer too. We can now return back to our normal scene, and I can now go into my timeline and I can see where I've got the white of the right eye and the pupil of the right eye. I don't need both of these layers anymore, so I'm just going to get rid of my pupil and trash it, and I'm just going to call this the right eye layer. We can get rid of that, and now I can add on my new right eye, which has both the pupil and the white inside of it. So we're simply replacing that one. Let's do the same thing for the left eye. Again, go to your library panel and create a new symbol. We'll call this the left eye. Again, all caps just to distinguish it. We'll say OK. This left eye, of course, needs to have the leftmost white, but let's rename this first part. In our timeline, white. Here's eye white for the left in the center. Go down to your timeline and create a new pupil. Do make sure to select it, double click on it, there we go. And then in that layer, let's do the left pupil as well, clicking and dragging it onto the center. With this now established, we can return to our main scene, scene 1, and let's get rid of both the pupil and the white of this. So I can delete both of those away. Now keep in mind, when I did that for both of those layers, and I only need one of the layers. So I'm going to get rid of one of these, trash it, and select that other layer. We're going to call this the left eye. So this will control the timeline for the left eye. Let's place that new left eye inside of here. There it is, placed up on top of that. Now the last thing that I want to do is to take the head and turn the entire head and face into its own symbol. Now the reason I want to do this is because I may be able to or want to rotate and move the head just slightly and have all the parts inside of it also move along with it. So to do this, I'm going to go down to my timeline, and I'll start off at the very top. In my case, my mouth layer is the topmost layer. We'll scroll to the bottom, and I'll select everything except for the body and of course our rough sketch. So hold down Shift and click on the almost to last one. In this case it'll be the face, and this will get all of the layers in between. With all of these selected, we can now right click on them and tell it to cut the layers. This will of course extract everything. Now let's go into our library and create a new symbol. We're going to call this the full head, or you can actually give it whatever name that you want, but then this indicates that it's the entirely created head. We'll say OK to this. Then we can go down to our timeline, and before we do anything else, let's right click on layer 1 and let's paste the layers. This will paste everything right back into place, and of course if you don't see anything, we may need to zoom out because it's been pasted a little bit offset. I'm going to click and drag him back into place right here, and that looks good with that. Now that I've got our full head established with this, we can go back up to our timeline and go back to scene 1. You can see now that I've got a full head symbol inside of our library. So we can go to our timeline and let's create a new layer, and we'll call this our head layer. There we go. And inside of this head layer, let's pull on a copy of our full head onto its own area, and now it has its own individual timeline. Now of course at this time you may want to change your point of rotation to down next to his neck. In order to do this, choose your free transform tool. This will allow you to click carefully on the white dot in the center. Let's place it down closer to the bottom portion here. So now if I need to, I can rotate his head back and forth, and all of the little parts go along with him. With this done, we can go up to File and save our document. And in the next video, we're going to focus on creating the different phoneme illustrations for all the different mouth positions.